Heading into this training camp and preseason for the New York Rangers, it definitely seemed like there were about 5 prospects that had a somewhat serious chance at potentially making the opening night lineup, as there were definitely a few spots that were quite open and were definitely up for grabs. But as we have gone along here and we're getting further and further into this preseason, and honestly we're getting quite close now to the beginning of the actual regular season at the NHL level, it is looking more and more likely that Mike Sullivan, the new head coach, is going to go with a more kind of veteran lineup with more experienced players at the NHL level and, of course, pro level, instead of going with some of the younger talent there with certain prospects like a Brennan Hoffman, a Brett Berard, Gabe Perreault, Noah Laba, or a Scott Morrow. And in today's video, we're going to kind of take a look at and talk about some of the updates and news that has come out here that could give us a much better idea on where we could end up seeing these 5 main prospects begin this upcoming season, and kind of take a look at a bit of a preview on what this actual lineup could look like to begin this upcoming season, because of course it was a pretty hot topic amongst fans about kind of what was going to happen with these main 5 prospects here that all seem about NHL ready in Hoffman, Berard, Perreault, Laba, and Morrow, but none of them have established themselves as kind of full-time NHLers as of this moment. Guys like Hoffman and Berard, of course, have had a decent amount of sample size and good run at the AHL level, putting up some pretty good numbers now for, a couple seasons, but they are, of course, definitely not full-time established NHLers at this point. Then you've got 2 players like Gabe Perreault and Noah Laba who got their first taste of pro hockey at the end of both of their college seasons. Last season, of course, when, Laba came over, got to play 11 games with the Hartford Wolfpack, having like 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points. Looked pretty good there, of course, but only 11 games at the AHL level. And Gabe Perreault had 5 games played at the NHL level at the end of last season where he had 0 points. And then you got a guy like Scott Morrow who, finally played his first kind of full season of pro hockey where he had, 14 games played at the NHL level with the Canes there in the regular season, having 6 points, 1 goal, 5 assists, got 5 games in the playoffs there, no points. In the AHL with the Chicago Wolves, put up some pretty good numbers there as well. In the playoffs, had 2 games played, no points. But in the regular season, the AHL had 52 games played, 13 goals, 26 assists for 39 total points. So he obviously had a really great season in the AHL for his first time at the pro level, like for a full season, of course. Had 2 games back in the 23-24 season there with Carolina at the NHL level. But this was his first kind of real run at the NHL level and pro level in general, and he did pretty good, of course, but he definitely has some questions defensively. So all 5 of these players, have shown flashes at the pro level, but I think it's clear that none of them have really fully established themselves so far. And with this Rangers team having a veteran, experienced head coach like a Mike Sullivan, who is coming in here to absolutely win hockey games. I mean, of course, he's going to worry about developing players, at some level, of course, but he, at the end of the day, is going to want to put out the absolute best lineup that he thinks can win hockey games right now for this team. So he might opt to go with some more veteran guys, even though, us fans might rather see a guy like, Brett Berard on the third line instead of a guy like Connor Sheary, where a guy like Mike Sullivan, of course, as that kind of a head coach, very well might end up picking the more veteran player over that younger, less experienced prospect. Anyways, though, let's get into the actual practice lines from Wednesday to really get a kind of better idea on what we could potentially see to begin this upcoming season. And also, we're going to kind of see where these prospects are that we just talked about and kind of see where it seems like they might be heading to begin this upcoming season. And first off, quickly, I will mention, of course, that the other day we did see Brennan Hoffman officially get sent down. So he did get cut. So he'll, of course, be joining the Hartford Wolfpack in their training camp there where he'll begin this upcoming season. So the other 4 guys are still at camp there: Perreault, Laba, Morrow, and Berard. But Hoffman, like I said, did get sent down already. So the lines are as follows: Gabe Perreault, Mika Zibanejad, and Alexi Lafreniere's line 1. Now, we're going to see some things change around once JT Miller comes back, and it does seem like he is about ready to return. Then you've got for the next line Artemi Panarin, Vincent Trocheck, and Will Cooley. Then you've got for the third line Connor Sheary, Juuso Parssinen, Taylor Radish. For line 4, it ended up being Brett Berard, Sam Carrick, Johnny Brodzinski, and for line 5, it ended up being Adam Edstrom, Noah Laba, and Matt Rempe. So the main things of note there, I guess, are, of course, that, JT Miller is absent right now. Of course, he had that little kind of injury scare in practice, but it does seem like it's not going to be anything too serious or long-term, which is very, very good. Of course, I was a little worried once I saw that video of him have that non-contact injury, it seemed like, but of course, it does seem like he's all good to go now, or about going to be, so that is great news. So it does seem like at that moment, once he does return, Gabe Perreault will probably get kicked out of the maybe even top 12 and may just end up kind of starting in the AHL, like actually to begin this season once we do see, of course, JT Miller fully return, but maybe he is right now kind of that top kind of call-up guy, which it definitely would make a lot of sense, especially if there is a spot open in that top 6 with his kind of high-end offensive skill. So I would imagine we're definitely, of course, going to see things change around, but it is also pretty interesting to note that we do see a line of, Panarin, Trocheck, and Cooley instead of, Cooley, of course, with Zibanejad and, what I kind of expected to be a line of like JT Miller, Zibanejad, and Cooley, where now, of course, we're seeing a guy like Cooley on the right side, and he's joining guys like Panarin and Trocheck instead of Lafreniere, who's kind of swapped around. So I think that's, of course, pretty interesting. That's another kind of pretty big thing of note. Of course, another one is, Brett Berard being on line 4 there with Karraker and Brodzinski instead of Edstrom and Rempe, which I definitely think is pretty interesting. And, of course, as good as Laba has been, I just got that feeling that it's not going to happen and he will begin in the AHL no matter what, unless he goes out there and puts up, like 2 hat tricks. I just don't think we're going to see him begin in the NHL, unfortunately, which is a little disappointing, but it's not terribly surprising, unfortunately. And for the defensemen, it ended up being on the top pair. No surprise at all. Vladislav Gavrikov and Adam Fox. Then for pair 2, it was Carson Soucy alongside Will Borgen. And then for the third pair, it was just kind of rotating around. Vince Mercogliano did say it was the same thing as Tuesday, where, the top 4 was Gavrikov, Foxy, Soucy, Borg, and then the bottom was just kind of, a bunch of guys rotating with, Braden Schneider, Urho Vakanainen, Matthew Robertson, Casey Fitzgerald, and Scott Morrow. Of course, Schneider is going to be in the top 6, 100%. He's just not going to be. He will be in there for sure, but he was, of course, just coming back from the surgery and stuff he had, so he's just kind of working his way back into the mix there and, kind of getting going again, of course. Then you got Vakanainen, he'll be fighting for that kind of 6/7 spot alongside Scott Morrow. And, of course, I do think Matthew Robertson and Casey Fitzgerald are both more than likely going to begin in the AHL, but they definitely could be pretty decent kind of potential call-up candidates. Next up here, though, we're going to take a look at a pretty interesting post on X here from Vince Mercogliano, of course, I would say pretty reputable, New York Rangers kind of insider / reporter or writer, whatever you want to call him, but he does a lot of great things talking about the Rangers, and he, of course, has some kind of inside information and stuff, and this is what he ended up having to say on this kind of whole kind of prospect situation here with these kind of 5 prospects I was talking about in today's video. So he goes on to say, quote, "I know this can come across as lip service, but I believe there's some foreshadowing here. It's critical that the New York Rangers start getting more out of their prospect pool with Berard, Laba, Othmann, Perreault, and Morrow at the top of that list. Getting them some NHL experience should be a priority this season, but most, if not all, will start in the AHL. That's in large part for development, but also to hold on to veterans such as Johnny Brodzinski and Connor Sheary. Injuries are bound to strike at some point, and they want to protect their depth." He also goes on to say, "It'll be something to monitor, but I believe message to kids is that they need to use AHL time constructively and be ready for an opportunity at some point during the season." And at this exact moment, if everyone is healthy, I do think, unfortunately, that it is definitely quite possible we see all 5 of these players not in the NHL lineup to begin this upcoming season on opening night when they take on the Pittsburgh Penguins. I can see it being a reality where all 5 are not in there, and that might be extremely disappointing to hear for some fans, and, myself included. I was really hoping to see this team kind of give an opportunity to begin this season to at least a couple of these guys, at least kind of 2 of the 5 there, but at this point there, it seems like it's possible we don't see any of the 5 begin there, and as disappointing as it is, I understand where, Mike Sullivan and Chris Drury would be coming from, because they might not want to end up getting rid of or kind of end up having to waive guys like Johnny Brodzinski or Juuso Parssinen or, Connor Sheary at this moment, where they kind of probably want to hold on to those guys for depth reason, to have them in that kind of bottom six and, just kind of have them around the team to just provide some solid overall depth. So that's kind of the unfortunate part there. After picking up a guy like Taylor Raddysh, I think that definitely hurt the chances of guys like a, Brett Berard or Brennan Hoffman, especially getting one of those spots there on that third line. Once he was signed, I knew for a fact there was no chance we were going to see both of pretty much Berard and Hoffman there. It really kind of, hindered the ability to kind of see one of those spots being really open for one of those guys, because they went out there and paid him like 1.55 or 1.5 million per season. So that's just too big of a contract, really, to go out there and just not play the guy at all. So that's where it is unfortunate, and obviously it does kind of suck for some of these prospects, but maybe this is going to be better for them. Maybe they are going to go down there and they're going to tear things up with, not just these 5 prospects, but you're going to have other guys like Adam Sikora, Jackson Dorrington. You're going to have a guy like a Dylan Rubrek. There are going to be a lot of really good prospects down there in the AHL to begin this season, and you could see a top 6 down there in the AHL to begin this season with a mix of guys like, Rubrek, Laba, Hoffman, Berard, Perreault. I mean, there are going to be a lot of really talented prospects. Then you got, those solid veteran guys like, Anton Blid down there as well, who's just a, kind of good AHLer. So I think overall this team is in a pretty good spot right now. They've got some depth. They've got some young talent that's knocking on the door. Now, of course, might not see these guys to begin this season at the NHL level, but I'd imagine we're definitely going to see a mixture of those 5 guys at some point throughout the season, whether it's with a defenseman getting injured, Morrow coming up, or whether it's a center getting hurt and Lab is coming up, or whether it's a, top 6 winger and Perreault's coming in, or a bottom 6 winger and a guy like, Berard or Hoffman's coming in. I do think we're going to see a mixture of these guys come up at some point throughout the season there with poor play or injuries happening. But I do think to begin this season, it's definitely looking like we're going to see probably all 5 potentially of these players outside of the starting lineup for the New York Rangers at the NHL level to begin this season up against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely don't forget to click that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content, as I do post a video about the New York Rangers every single day. And also, definitely don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on, all 5 of these prospects probably not being in the open net lineup at the NHL level. Which ones do you think have impressed the most there that should be in the lineup there? Which ones do you think should start in the AHL? Let me know your thoughts on these lines and these prospects in the comment section down below. I'll catch you next one, and let's go Rangers.